The courtesy protocol. Scene 1. The midnight mistake. No, no, no! Cancel! Delete! For the love of all magical and mundane gods, unsend! I slammed my hands onto the steering wheel of my car, my eyes nearly popping out of my head as I stared at the glowing screen of my smartphone. The digital interface brutally confirmed my worst nightmare. The 5-minute-long, chaotic, highly embarrassing voice note hadn't been sent to my best friend, Julian. It had been sent to a contact right next to him in my recent chat list. To Oliver Vance, my chief secretary. Oliver Vance wasn't just my employee, he was a walking, talking monolith of cold, unyielding corporate perfection. At 24, he possessed the pragmatism of a 100-year-old judge, spoke exclusively in a monotonous, deadpan business tone, and had never, not once in the 6 months I had been the CEO of Howard Innovations, shown a single human emotion. He was an absolute robot in a tailored suit. As for me, Christian Howard, the 25-year-old newly appointed, hyperactive and admittedly chaotic CEO, I had just sent him a midnight audio file of myself sobbing into a tub of mint chocolate chip ice cream while wearing cat ear headphones, complaining that my romantic life was a barren wasteland and that I accidentally ordered a giant, life-sized plush alpaca online while tipsy. I'm dead. I have to resign. I'll fake my undisappearance and move to a remote island, I whimpered, burying my face in my hands. My heart stopped. With a trembling finger, I tapped the screen. From Oliver Vance, secretary. Text. Received. The audio file has been archived in the folder marked SAO Internal Memorandums. Have a productive evening, Mr. Howard. Please ensure you are not late for the 8:00 a.m. financial audit. I stared at the text. No, are you all right, sir? No, why do you have cat ears? Just a brutal, cold corporate acknowledgement. Archived! I shrieked into the empty car. He archived my soul-crushing humiliation? Scene 2. The monotone war. The next morning, the sun was shining entirely too brightly for a man walking toward his execution. I stepped out of the executive elevator, frantically straightening my bright yellow tie, a stark contrast to the dreary grey suits everyone else wore. I was an optimist by nature, always ready to bounce back with a smile, but my palms were dripping with sweat. I approached the grand glass doors of the CEO's suite. Sitting behind a flawless, completely organized desk was Oliver. He looked like a high-fashion model who had been cursed to work in logistics. Tall, with an unbending posture, sharp dark brown eyes hidden behind thin silver-rimmed glasses, and dark hair styled back with mathematical precision. His charcoal grey suit didn't have a single speck of dust. "Good morning, Oliver," I bellowed, forcing my most cheerful, loud and energetic grin onto my face, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Wonderful day to optimize our quarterly assets, don't you think?" Oliver didn't look up from his tablet. His fingers moved with seamless efficiency. "Good morning, Mr. Howard. The temperature today is 21 degrees Celsius with a 40% chance of rain. I fail to see how the meteorological conditions correlate with asset optimization. However, your enthusiasm has been noted." He finally raised his head, his face an unreadable, emotionless mask. He adjusted his glasses with one finger. "Before we begin the financial audit, I have processed your morning requests." Oliver spoke, his voice completely flat, deadpan, and corporate. He slid a perfectly printed document across the desk. "Here is the comprehensive market research on large-scale camelid textiles, specifically focusing on the import tax of giant plush alpacas. I have also prepared a list of local psychological counseling services specializing in barren wasteland romantic anxieties, all within the company's health insurance policy, of course." My jaw dropped. My face burned so hot I thought my hair was going to catch fire. He was trolling me, in the most polite, professional, and terrifying way possible. "Oh, Oliver," I hissed, leaning over his desk, my hyperactive hands waving frantically. "You said you archived it. You weren't supposed to actually analyze the contents of my midnight breakdown." "As your chief secretary, it is my duty to analyze all data inputs provided by the executive branch," Oliver replied, his expression unchanging, his voice a perfect drone. "Furthermore, the local barista inquired if you required mint chocolate chip flavoring in your morning espresso. I informed her that the CEO prefers his espresso corporate and unmelted. Shall I schedule the alpaca delivery for your private office, or your residential address, sir. Residential. I squeaked out, completely defeated, before clearing my throat and trying to regain my dignity. I mean, there is no alpaca, Oliver. It was a metaphorical alpaca. A metaphorical alpaca weighing 25 kilograms and occupying 6 cubic feet of space. Fascinating, Oliver murmured, his eyes dropping back to his tablet. The auditors are waiting in room B, Mr. Howard. Try not to sob during the presentation. It affects our stock projections. Internal monologue. That's it. It's a war. He thinks he can break my sunny disposition with his robotic sarcasm. Never. I am Christian Howard. I am going to break through that icy exterior. I am going to make this man crack a genuine, human, unarchived smile if it's the last thing I do. Scene 3. Operation Smile. Over the next 2 weeks, my primary objective shifted from running a multi-million-dollar technology conglomerate to a singular, obsessive mission. Operation Smile. I tried everything. I spent hours researching dad jokes, internet memes, and corporate satire. During a high-stakes meeting with our European investors, I secretly replaced the standard PowerPoint transition effects with animations of dancing corporate cats. The entire boardroom erupted into laughter. Investors were chuckling, executives were smiling, and I immediately whipped my head around to look at Oliver, who was standing by the projector. He didn't even blink. He simply adjusted his glasses and clicked the remote. The feline animations represent a 6% increase in visual engagement, Oliver stated to the investors, his voice a flat, deadpan drone. However, the processing power required for the cat graphics has delayed our server response time by 3 seconds. Moving on to slide 12. I slumped in my chair. 0 points for the cats. The next day, I tried a different approach. I found a highly recommended comedy club comedian and hired him to write a customized, hilarious corporate monologue. When Oliver came into my office to hand me the afternoon signatures, I casually stood up, cleared my throat, and delivered the routine with flawless comedic timing, complete with expressive hand gestures and dramatic pauses. When I finished, I was practically painting, flashing him a huge, expectant grin. Well, what do you think, Oliver? Pretty good, right? Oliver stared at me through his silver-rimmed glasses for 3 long, agonizing seconds. The ticking of the wall clock felt incredibly loud. Your syntax was acceptable, Mr. Howard, Oliver replied smoothly, his tone entirely monotonous. However, your breathing intervals during the punchline were unoptimized. I have compiled a spreadsheet of vocal coaches to assist with your comedic delivery. Please sign these forms by 5 o'clock. The company's legal department does not find humor legally binding. Are you even human? I finally burst out, throwing my hands in the air and pacing around my grand mahogany desk. Oliver, I just want a reaction. A chuckle. A smirk. A tiny lifting of the corners of your mouth. You're 24, not 100. Why are you like this? Oliver paused, his fingers freezing over his leather folder. For a fraction of a second, just a tiny sliver of a moment, his sharp dark brown eyes softened, a complex, unreadable shadow crossing his handsome features. My contract states that I must provide administrative excellence, loyalty, and corporate discretion, Mr. Howard, Oliver said quietly, his voice dropping slightly from its standard robotic pitch. It does not state that I must provide entertainment. If my lack of facial expression is hindering your executive performance, you may file a complaint with Human Resources. He bowed formally and walked out of the room, leaving me standing alone in the massive office. Internal monologue. I messed up. I pushed him too hard. His voice, it didn't sound robotic just now. It sounded guarded, like he was hiding behind that perfect gray suit because he was afraid of what would happen if he let the mask slip. Scene 4. The corporate retreat. A tech innovation summit at a luxury hot spring resort. Brilliantly managed by myself, of course, I proclaimed, stepping out of the sleek black sedan and throwing my arms wide to inhale the fresh mountain air. No ringing phones, no sterile white walls, and absolutely no room B auditors. Isn't this majestic, Oliver? Oliver stepped out from the passenger's side, smoothly lifting 2 heavy leather briefcases without a single grunt. His dark hair was still combed to mathematical perfection, and despite the 3-hour drive, his tailored charcoal gray suit remained crisp and unwrinkled. The atmospheric humidity is 65%, which is suboptimal for our electronic hardware, Mr. Howard, Oliver replied, his voice maintaining its signature flat, robotic cadence. Furthermore, the serene forest has zero cellular reception for our primary server core. However, I have already successfully negotiated a temporary satellite link with the resort management. Your scheduled 2:00 p.m. briefing with the European directors will proceed without latency.
I slumped my shoulders, letting out a dramatic puff of air. Oliver.
We are in the countryside. Can you please, just for 48 hours, disable the corporate protocol? Look at the trees. Look at the little squirrels. Oliver glanced at a small squirrel sitting on a nearby wooden fence, adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses with one long finger, and looked back at his tablet. The rodent appears to be searching for acorns, a highly unoptimized method of food gathering. Shall I check us into the executive suite now, sir? Internal monologue. He is unmultiple, a literal human glacier. But I am an optimist. The fresh air, the hot springs, and a 3-day economic forum are the perfect ingredients for Operation Smile. I just need to find his hidden glitch. Scene 5. The guarded wall. The first evening of the summit was exhausting. After 5 hours of intense networking with stubborn international tech tycoons, my social battery was completely drained. I sat at a low wooden table in the resort's private dining pavilion, staring blankly at an intricate plate of traditional sashimi. Oliver was standing discreetly near the door, his tablet held firmly against his chest, watching the room like a hawk.
Oliver, sit down and eat something, I groaned, waving my hand toward the empty cushion across from me.
There are no investors left in this room. The executive hierarchy is temporarily suspended due to extreme exhaustion.
My contract dictates that I must remain operational until the executive branch retires for the evening, Mr. Howard, Oliver stated, his monotone voice echoing softly in the quiet room.
I am ordering you as usual to eat a piece of tuna, Oliver. I barked playfully, flashing him a tired but bright grin. Oliver paused. For a brief second, his sharp dark brown eyes flickered with a hint of hesitation. Then, with seamless, silent grace, he slid onto the cushion, kneeling perfectly. He picked up his chopsticks with flawless etiquette, dipped a single piece of fish into the soy sauce, and ate it without changing his facial expression. The culinary preparation is adequate, Oliver murmured deadpan. You know, Oliver. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hands, my hyperactive eyes locked onto his handsome, stoic face. I looked up your employment history before we left. You used to be the chief assistant to the director of Vance Enterprises. You practically ran their entire financial division at 22. Why did you leave such a massive firm to work for a chaotic, newly appointed CEO like me? The air in the room suddenly grew remarkably heavy. Oliver's chopsticks froze midair. The smooth, mechanical rhythm he usually carried vanished, replaced by a sudden, rigid stillness. The professional relationship with my previous employer reached a natural termination point, Mr. Howard, Oliver said, his voice dropping slightly, losing a fraction of its robotic drone.
It sounded cold.
Genuinely cold. But you were their top asset. Ilya told me they blamed you for a massive data leak right before you resigned. I pressed on, my curiosity getting the better of me. I know it was a lie, obviously, because you're too perfect to leak anything, but...
Mr. Howard, Oliver interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a sharp, icy finality that cut me off instantly.
He placed his chopsticks neatly on the ceramic rest and looked me directly in the eyes. My past performance data is irrelevant to my current administrative duties at Howard Innovations. If you require a secretary with a flawless corporate reputation, my resignation can be on your desk by tomorrow morning. I froze. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. The playful, comedic atmosphere evaporated into absolute silence. Internal monologue. I crossed the line. The cold mask. It's not a corporate persona. It's a shield. Someone at his old job destroyed his trust, framed him, and left him so broken that he chose to become a machine just to protect himself from being hurt again. Oliver, I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice sincere, my usual hyperactive energy completely melting away. I didn't mean to pry. I don't want your resignation. I never want your resignation. Oliver looked at my desperate, apologetic face through his silver glasses. He let out a very faint, almost imperceptible sigh, his rigid shoulders dropping just a millimeter. Apology accepted, sir. If you are finished with your dinner, I will escort you to your quarters. Scene 6. The unarchived reality. Around midnight, a violent thunderstorm rolled over the mountains, cutting off the resort's satellite internet connection. Panicked about the global stock opening in the morning, I threw on a simple cotton robe and rushed down the dark wooden corridors toward the resort's business center. I expected it to be empty, but as I approached the glowing screen of the main terminal, I saw a familiar silhouette. Oliver was sitting at the desk, his gray suit jacket thrown over the back of the chair, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was furiously typing on a laptop, his silver glasses reflecting lines of complex financial code. Next to him lay a half-empty cup of black coffee. "Oliver," I called out softly, stepping into the room. He didn't flinch, but his typing slowed. "Good morning, Mr. Howard." The satellite link was severed by a lightning strike at 11:42 p.m. I am manually rerouting our backup data through a secure local telecommunications grid to ensure our morning trading volume remains unaffected. I walked closer, standing right next to his chair. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, a slight tremor in his fingers from drinking too much caffeine, and the sheer, exhausting effort he was putting in just to keep my company safe. "You've been up all night," I murmured, my stomach twisting with a strange, heavy ache. "It is my duty to ensure." "Stop it, Oliver," I said softly, my hand moving forward instinctively. Before my brain could stop me, my fingers gently brushed against his rolled-up sleeve, my palm resting over his tense forearm. His skin was warm, vibrating with exhaustion. "The company won't ruin itself over a 3-hour data delay, but you will ruin your health if you keep acting like a machine." Oliver froze. His dark brown eyes slowly looked up from the screen, staring at my hand on his arm, then up at my face. For the first time in 6 months, his expression cracked. He looked vulnerable, tired, and deeply human. "If I am not perfect, Mr. Howard," Oliver whispered, his voice cracking slightly, completely stripped of its corporate drone. He looked down at his keyboard, his knuckles turning white. "If I let my guard down even for a second, people find a way to use it against me. Efficiency is the only thing that keeps me safe." My heart did a painful, violent flip. I slid my hand down from his arm, my long fingers gently wrapping around his cold, trembling hand, squeezing it with absolute warmth. "You don't have to be a machine around me, Oliver," I said, my voice dropping to a soft, passionate promise as I looked directly into his eyes. "You can mess up. You can send an accidental audio message. You can buy a giant plush alpaca. I won't use it against you. I will protect you. I promise." Oliver stared at me, his breath hitching. The silence stretching between us was heavy with a sudden, intense romantic tension. For 3 long seconds, he didn't pull his hand away from mine. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth twitched. A tiny, incredibly soft, and breathtakingly genuine smile broke through his icy exterior, lighting up his entire face. Internal monologue. He smiled. A real, beautiful, unarchived smile. And right then, looking at him under the dim light of the terminal, I realized my mission was completely compromised. I didn't want to make my secretary smile just to win a war. I wanted to see that smile for the rest of my life. Scene 7. The shift in the data. Returning to the headquarters of Howard Innovations felt different. On the surface, nothing had changed. The glass walls of the executive suite were still sparkling, the gray-suited employees were still rushing around with data charts, and Oliver Vance was back behind his pristine desk, looking like an untouchable icon of corporate perfection in his freshly pressed charcoal suit. But the ice had cracked. "Good morning, Oliver," I boomed as I stepped out of the elevator, flashing my usual energetic, sunny smile. "Ready to dominate the international tech market today?" Oliver didn't look up from his screen immediately, but as his fingers flew across the keyboard, his monotonous drone carried a completely new, subtle undertone. "Good morning, Mr. Howard."
The morning coffee has been placed on your desk.
Temperature is exactly 78 degrees Celsius. However, I have adjusted the recipe. I added precisely half a drop of mint extract. According to my calculations, it increases cognitive focus for CEOs who spend their midnights ordering giant alpaca plushies. I froze in the doorway, my face instantly bursting into a hot, burning crimson. I whipped my head around to look at him. Oliver slowly raised his head. His expression was still perfectly stoic, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the harsh office light. But behind those lenses, his dark brown eyes held a playful, incredibly soft sparkle. He was teasing me. Genuinely, intentionally teasing me. "Oh, Oliver," I hissed, leaning over his partition wall, my hands flailing. "We agreed that what happened at the mountain resort stays at the mountain resort. The mint coffee is an unauthorized modification of company protocol. The modification has been logged and approved by the administrative branch, which is me," Oliver replied deadpan, adjusting his glasses. "Furthermore, I have reorganized your afternoon schedule. I cancelled your non-essential meeting with the marketing committee. Your biometric data from your fitness tracker indicates an elevated heart rate and lack of sleep. I have scheduled a mandatory 40-minute dozing on the executive sofa window." Internal monologue. Oh, gods. He's not a machine anymore. He's an incredibly attentive, slightly overprotective, and devastatingly handsome secretary who is currently using his corporate power to make sure I take a nap. My heart is beating so fast right now, my fitness tracker is probably going to explode. "Oliver," I whispered, my voice dropping its hyperactive energy, replaced by a sudden, heavy warmth. "Thank you." Oliver paused, his fingers hovering over the keys. He looked up, his gaze locking onto mine for 3 long, agonizing seconds. The heavy glass doors of the office felt like they were blocking out the rest of the world. "It is my duty to look after the company's most valuable asset, Christian," he said quietly, using my first name for the first time inside the office. The romantic tension in the air was so thick it was suffocating. I wanted to reach across the desk and grab his hand right then and there. But before I could take a step, the elevator doors behind me opened with a loud, aggressive chime. "Scene, the shadow of Vance Enterprises." Well, look at how cozy the new tech dynasty looks. A cold, arrogant voice echoed through the reception area. I turned around, my smile instantly vanishing. Standing by the glass doors was a tall, older man in an immensely expensive pinstriped suit, his silver hair slicked back. Director Vance, the head of Vance Enterprises, Oliver's former employer. I felt Oliver's entire presence shift behind me. The playful warmth in his aura vanished instantly, replaced by a freezing, rigid, and terrifying stillness. He stood up from his chair, his body completely tense, his face turning an ashen pale. "Director Vance," Oliver spoke, his voice dropping back into the absolute, deadpan, and lifeless machine drone. "You do not have a scheduled appointment with Howard Innovations. Protocol dictates that you must clear your arrival with the front desk." "I don't need a protocol to visit a thief, Oliver," Director Vance sneered, walking into the room as if he owned it, throwing a thick legal folder onto Oliver's desk. "Mr. Howard, I hope you haven't gotten too attached to your chief secretary. Vance Enterprises has just filed a formal lawsuit against Howard Innovations. We have proof that Oliver leaked our confidential server architecture before he ran away to your little startup." "That's a lie," I shouted, slamming my fist onto the partition. My hyperactive optimism turned into an explosive protective rage. "Oliver would never leak data. You framed him because he refused to cover up your tax fraud, and you know it."
"Intentions do not matter in a courtroom, young man," Director Vance chuckled coldly, looking at Oliver with malicious satisfaction.
"The digital footprint bears his encrypted signature. By tomorrow morning, the press will have this story. Your company's stock will plummet, and Oliver will be blacklisted from the corporate world forever. Unless—" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Oliver returns to Vance Enterprises and signs a lifetime non-disclosure settlement." The room went dead silent. The ticking of the wall clock felt like a countdown to an execution. I whipped my head back to look at Oliver. He was staring at the legal folder, his hands trembling slightly against his sides. The cold gray suit that usually made him look untouchable now looked like a cage. He looked trapped, terrified, and ready to sacrifice himself to save my company. "I will sign," Oliver whispered, his voice completely flat, deadpan, and broken. "Mr. Howard has nothing to do with this. I will resign immediately and return to—" No, you won't.
I shrieked, lunging across the space and grabbing Oliver's arm, pulling him behind my back. I turned to Director Vance, my eyes burning with an unyielding, fierce determination.
Get out of my building, Vance. You think you can scare me with a legal scarecrow? You don't know who you're dealing with. I am Christian Howard, and I don't archive my people. Director Vance scoffed, turning on his heel. You have until 5 o'clock to change your mind, Mr. Howard. After that, your perfect little machine turns into scrap metal. Scene 9. The Executive Intervention. The executive office was in complete lockdown. It was 4:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the deadline. Oliver was sitting at the terminal, his silver-rimmed glasses thrown onto the desk, his head buried in his hands. For the first time since I met him, his posture was completely broken. You should have let me go, Christian, he rasped, his voice trembling with a raw, heartbreaking vulnerability. Vance Enterprises is too powerful. They will destroy your family's legacy. I am just a secretary. I am replaceable. Shut up, Oliver, I yelled, pacing frantically around the room, my brain working at 1,000 miles an hour. You are not replaceable. Do you know why I never checked your audio message file out of the archive? Because I didn't need a machine. I needed you, the sarcastic, brilliant, mint espresso brewing Oliver Vance. I slammed my hands onto his desk, leaning down until our faces were inches apart. Think like a pragmatist, Oliver. You're the master of data optimization. If Director Vance used your encrypted signature to frame you, where would the original, unedited log be stored? Oliver blinked, his sharp dark brown eyes suddenly widening as my words hit his analytical brain. A spark of life returned to his face.
He grabbed his glasses, shoving them back onto his nose.
The core server? Vance Enterprises keeps a ghost mirror drive in their offshore data center in Frankfurt. If the file was fabricated, the timestamps on the mirror drive won't match the local network logs. Can you hack it? I asked, a huge, wild grin breaking through my anxiety. Oliver's fingers immediately hit the keyboard with a ferocious, blinding, and terrifying speed. The mechanical clicking of the keys sounded like an upbeat battle rhythm. It's not hacking if I wrote the original security firewall for that server myself, sir. I left a backdoor protocol. I called it the courtesy exit. Do it! For 20 agonizing minutes, the only sound was the furious typing of a genius at work. The clock was ticking. 4:45 p.m. 4:52 p.m. 4:57 p.m. Got it, Oliver whispered. He hit the enter key with a sharp snap. The printer in the corner immediately whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper containing the original, unedited server logs. It proved with absolute mathematical certainty that Director Vance had manually forged Oliver's signature 3 days after he had already resigned. I have just forwarded the unedited logs directly to the Federal Fraud Investigation Bureau and the chief editors of every major financial newspaper, Oliver stated, his voice slowly returning to his calm, deadpan, but incredibly triumphant drone. He slid the printed copy into a leather folder. According to my projections, Vance Enterprises stock will lose 42% of its value within the first 10 minutes of the market opening tomorrow. Director Vance will be facing a mandatory 10-year prison sentence for corporate forgery and tax evasion. I let out a loud, wild scream of pure joy, leaping into the air and throwing my hands up. We won. We completely destroyed him. Scene 10. The lifetime contract. The clock on the wall struck 5:00 p.m. The deadline had passed, and Director Vance's empire was already crumbling in the digital silence of the network. The office was quiet, illuminated only by the warm, golden glow of the desk lamps. Oliver stood up from his chair, smoothly picking up his leather folder. He walked around his desk, stopping just 2 inches away from me. He looked at me through his silver glasses, his expression softening into that rare, breathtakingly beautiful, and genuine smile that belonged only to me. The crisis has been averted, Mr. Howard, Oliver murmured softly, his voice a deep, velvet melody that sent a sudden, happy thrill straight down my spine. However, my current performance data indicates a severe level of emotional exhaustion. I believe I am no longer fit to maintain the strict corporate protocol. He slowly reached up, his long, elegant fingers catching the edge of his gray silk tie. With a single, smooth motion, he loosened the knot and pulled the tie off, Draping it over his desk, he unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his white dress shirt, exposing the warm skin of his collarbone. He looked incredibly attractive, completely stripped of his corporate armor.
Oliver, I breathed out, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I looked at him.
I am officially filing a complaint with the CEO, Oliver whispered, stepping even closer until our chests were practically touching. He reached out, his warm, strong hands gently wrapping around my waist, pulling me into his firm embrace. My current contract does not include the psychological compensation required for falling in love with a chaotic, hyperactive boss who orders alpacas at midnight. A breathless, joyful laugh escaped my lips. I raised my arms, wrapping them tightly around his neck, burying my face into his shoulder, inhaling the comforting scent of his mint espresso and clean linen. "And what are your terms for a settlement, Advisor Vance?" Oliver leaned down, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear, his deep voice sending a wild tremor through my entire body. "A lifetime contract, Christian. An absolute unarchived commitment. No business hours, no protocol, and a mandatory kiss every morning before the financial audit."
Approved, I whispered, pulling back just enough to look into his beautiful, devoted dark brown eyes. Approved without any modifications.
Oliver smiled, a wide, brilliant, and radiant human smile. Before closing the final distance between us, his lips melting into mine in a passionate, deep, and lingering kiss that sealed our timeline forever. Scene 11. The spreadsheet of affection.
Oliver, please tell me you did not just send a calendar invite for a kiss.
I stared at my laptop screen in absolute disbelief, a wild, helpless grin breaking across my face. I was sitting at the grand mahogany desk in my private office, the morning sun casting a warm, golden glow across the room. I had been back at my post as CEO of Howard Innovations for exactly 3 days since the downfall of Director Vance, and my life had officially entered uncharted corporate territory. Oliver Vance stood across from my desk, holding a silver tray with a single, perfectly warm cup of mint-infused espresso. His charcoal grey suit was as flawless and unwrinkled as always, his midnight hair combed with mathematical precision. He casually adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses with one long finger, his expression a deadpan, unreadable mask.
The request was submitted under the label Urgent Executive Recalibration, Mr. Howard. Oliver replied, his voice a perfect, flat corporate drone.
He smoothly set the espresso down on my coaster. "According to my predictive data, your cognitive focus decreases by 27% if we do not initiate physical synchronization before the 9:00 a.m. financial audit. I am merely optimizing your executive workflow." "Optimization!" I shrieked softly, throwing my hands in the air and laughing as I jumped out of my leather chair. I marched around the desk, stopping just inches away from him. "You are incredible, you know that. We have been dating for 72 hours and you're already treating our relationship like a quarterly balance sheet."
A relationship requires structure to avoid untracked liabilities, Christian, Oliver murmured.
The corporate drone in his voice suddenly softened, dropping into that deep, velvet baritone that belonged only to me. A breathtakingly genuine smile broke through his cold exterior, making my stomach do a violent, happy flip. He reached out, his long, pale fingers gently catching the edge of my bright yellow tie, slowly pulling me close until our chests collided. "And according to my internal clock," Oliver whispered, his dark brown eyes locking onto mine with an intense, burning warmth, "you are currently 3 minutes late for your scheduled appointment." I hate delays, I breathed out, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I raised my arms, wrapping them tightly around his neck, pulling him down into a passionate, lingering morning kiss. It tasted like sweet mint, dark coffee, and pure, intoxicating relief. The office doors were closed, the outside world was blocked out, and for a few beautiful seconds, the timeline of Howard Innovations belonged entirely to us. We broke apart instantly. I practically leaped back toward my chair, frantically smoothing down my rumpled jacket, while Oliver, with supernatural speed, stepped back, adjusted his glasses, snatched his leather folder, and turned into an absolute emotionless machine before the door could even swing open. Scene 12. The fallout and the threat. The door burst open, and Ilya, our head of public relations, rushed inside, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. He was holding 3 different tablets, all of them flashing with bright red news alerts. Christian. Master Sterling, sir, have you seen the morning news? Delia stammered, his eyes darting between me and Oliver. Vance Enterprises, it's a complete bloodbath. The Federal Fraud Bureau raided the headquarters at dawn. Director Vance was dragged out in handcuffs. We are aware of the data outputs, Ilya, Oliver stated calmly, his voice a flat, deadpan drone as he stood beside my desk like a monument of corporate indifference. The market correction was mathematically inevitable due to their fraudulent practices. It's not just a correction, Oliver. Ilya shrieked, shoving a tablet into my hands. Look at the media. Vance Enterprises' board of directors is panicking. They are looking for a scapegoat. Their defense lawyers are already releasing statements to the press, claiming that you are the one who orchestrated the entire tax evasion scheme before you resigned. They are trying to turn the public against Howard Innovations. I looked down at the screen. The headlines were brutal. Fallen Empire. Did Chief Secretary Oliver Vance destroy Vance Enterprises from the inside? And Howard Innovations under fire. Is the new startup funded by stolen capital? My blood ran cold. The protective, explosive rage that had been dormant since the trial flared back to life in my chest. I slammed the tablet onto the desk, standing up. They are trying to drag Oliver back into the mud to save themselves. We have the unedited server logs from Frankfurt. We can crush their legal defense in an hour. The local legal system moves with a 60-day latency period. Mr. Howard, Oliver spoke, his voice completely flat, but I noticed his fingers tightening around the edge of his leather folder until his knuckles turned white. By the time our evidence is verified in a courtroom, a public relations damage to Howard Innovations will cause a 45% drop in our consumer trust index. Their strategy is not to win the lawsuit. Their strategy is to bankrupt us through reputation sabotage. Then we don't fight them in a courtroom, I said, a dangerous, defiant spark igniting in my blue eyes. I looked at Oliver, my hyperactive brain suddenly clicking into a wild, unpredictable plan. We fight them where they are weakest. The annual tech gala is tonight. The entire board of Vance Enterprises will be there trying to convince investors that they are still viable. We are going to walk right into the ballroom, Oliver, and we are going to close this deal publicly. Oliver stared at me through his silver glasses, his sharp jaw clenching. Attending the gala under the current media scrutiny is a 92% risk liability, Christian. Then it's a good thing I love high-risk investments. I smiled, stepping closer to him and looking directly into his pale face, my voice softening into an unyielding promise. We are going together, Oliver, not as a CEO and a secretary, but as partners. Scene 13. The protocol of the gala. The grand ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was a sea of luxurious silk dresses, expensive tuxedos, and suffocating corporate hypocrisy. The moment Oliver and I stepped through the arched entrance, the entire room went completely silent. Dozens of elite tech magnates and investors turned their heads, their whispers echoing like a wave of static electricity. Camera flashes immediately erupted, reflecting off the polished marble floors. I wore a sharp, midnight blue tuxedo with a bright gold bow tie, my personal statement of unyielding optimism. But beside me, Oliver was the true masterpiece. He had discarded his standard charcoal office suit for a custom-made, jet-black velvet tuxedo that fitted his tall, athletic frame perfectly. He wasn't wearing his silver-rimmed glasses tonight, exposing the raw, intense depth of his sharp, dark brown eyes. His dark hair was styled back with absolute elegance. He looked like an aristocratic prince, completely untouchable.
Maintain vertical posture, Christian, Oliver murmured under his breath, his lips barely moving as we walked down the grand staircase. 3 photographers from the financial press are tracking our spatial coordinates.
Do not let them see you sweat. I'm not sweating, Oliver, I whispered back, flashing a dazzling, confident smile to a passing billionaire. I'm just admiring how incredible you look without your armor. Half the room is staring at me in jealousy. Your flattery has been logged and archived for later consumption, he replied deadpan, though I saw the faint, beautiful flush of pink color the edge of his cheekbones.
Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo of corporate sabotage.
A cold, mocking voice cut through the classical music. We stopped. Standing in front of the champagne fountain was Charles Vance, the 30-year-old nephew of Director Vance and the newly appointed, desperate interim CEO of Vance Enterprises. He was holding a glass of wine, his eyes bloodshot, his face twisted in a bitter, arrogant sneer. Charles, Oliver spoke, his voice dropping into that icy, clinical drone that felt like a physical wall. Your presence at this event is statistically surprising given the current liquidity crisis of your family's asset portfolio. Shut your mouth, Vance! Charles hissed, stepping closer, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. You think you won because my uncle is in a cell? You're a traitor. You stole our client database, you leaked our architecture, and you brought it all to this second-rate Howard startup. Investors aren't stupid, Howard. Nobody is going to fund your next server project when they find out your chief secretary is a corporate spy. Several high-profile investors began to crowd around us, listening to the confrontation. The tension in the ballroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Oliver didn't steal a single byte of data. Charles, I said, stepping forward, my blue eyes flashing with a fierce, absolute authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. He built your entire security infrastructure from scratch. You framed him because he refused to falsify your quarterly earnings. And as for our new server project, we don't need to steal your database, because we just built something that makes Vance Enterprises look like an ancient abacus. Charles let out a harsh, nervous laugh. Bluffing won't save your stock price, Howard. It's not a bluff, Oliver said smoothly. He pulled a sleek, silver holographic drive from his velvet jacket, holding it up for the entire circle of investors to see. This is the live metric data for Howard Innovations' new decentralized cloud network. It operates with a zero-latency protocol and a 300% increase in data optimization compared to the outdated Vance architecture. The core firewall was written by me, and the original, untampered server logs proving Vance Enterprises' forgery have already been uploaded to the public press domain 5 minutes ago. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of investors. Several tech tycoons immediately pulled out their phones, their eyes widening as they checked the financial news. The data doesn't lie, Charles, I smiled, leaning in, my voice carrying the absolute victory of a top-tier closer. Your empire didn't fall because of a spy. It fell because you treated your best asset like a machine. And a machine always breaks when you overload it with lies. Charles went completely pale, his glass slipping from his fingers and shattering against the marble floor with a sharp crash. He stumbled backward, completely destroyed, as the circle of high-profile investors immediately abandoned him, swarming around Oliver and me with frantic offers of multi-million-dollar contracts. Scene 14. The unarchived reality. 1:00 a.m. The gala was over. Howard Innovations had secured over $15 million in new investment tethers in a single evening, cementing our position as the new tech powerhouse of the city. But as the heavy glass doors of the hotel pavilion closed behind us, I didn't care about the numbers. I was exhausted, my golden bow tie loosened, my feet hurting from hours of standing. Oliver and I walked out onto the private observation deck overlooking the glowing, endless sea of city lights. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Oliver walked to the edge of the stone railing, leaning against it. He looked out at the city, his velvet jacket open, his white shirt collar slightly loose. Without his silver glasses and his strict office persona, he looked peaceful. The heavy, invisible chains of his past with Vance Enterprises had finally been completely shattered tonight. He was entirely, beautifully free. $15 million, Oliver, I said softly, walking up beside him and leaning against the railing, looking at his perfect profile. We optimized the hell out of that ballroom. Oliver let out a low, soft chuckle, a sound that was pure music to my ears. He turned his head to look at me, his dark brown eyes reflecting the twinkling lights of the skyscrapers below. The data indicates that your performance was acceptable, Christian, Oliver murmured, his voice dropping into that deep, intensely romantic baritone. However, your emotional energy expenditure was highly unoptimized. You spent 40 minutes defending my reputation to the board when you should have been pitching our network variant slides. I don't care about the slides, Oliver, I said, my voice dropping its playful edge, becoming completely serious, filled with a raw, unyielding passion. I reached out, my long fingers gently sliding into his hand, our fingers intertwining with absolute warmth. I told you before, I don't archive my people. And I will spend the rest of my life defending you if I have to. You're not my secretary anymore. You're my universe.
Oliver stared at me, his breath hitching in his chest. The silence stretching between us on the high balcony was heavy with a sudden, beautiful, and overwhelming emotion.
Slowly, deliberately, he raised his free hand, his warm, strong fingers gently cupping the side of my jaw. He pulled me forward, closing the final distance between us until our lips melted together in a passionate, deep, and desperate kiss that tasted like cold midnight air and absolute devotion. It wasn't a corporate protocol. It wasn't a structured meeting. It was just two hearts beating in perfect, unarchived synchronization under the stars. Sound effect. A distinct, crisp ping of a smartphone receiving an audio file on the stone railing. I blinked, pulling back slightly with a soft laugh. I reached over, picking up my phone from the railing. Don't tell me. Did you just send me another midnight audio file, Advisor Vance? Oliver adjusted his collar. A rare, brilliant, and mischievous smirk finally breaking across his handsome face. According to my calculations, a vocal data input was necessary to finalize our lifetime agreement. Play it, Christian. I tapped the screen. From Oliver Vance? Audio playback. The sound of Oliver's deep, soft voice through the digital static, accompanied by a quiet, genuine chuckle. The contract is legally binding, Christian. I love you. Now put the phone away and kiss your advisor again before the timeline resets. I let out a joyful, breathless laugh, dropping the phone back onto the stone table. I lunged into his arms, wrapping my sleeves tightly around his neck as he lifted me slightly off the ground, our lips meeting again as the city lights blurred into a warm, golden haze around us.